Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. This is Biology Evolution Part 9. Today we are talking about what are the other important ideas about evolution. So, evolutionary processes lead to the biodiversity of all life, all of which is related by common ancestry. So please write that down. So the process of evolution has led to all of the different organisms we find on Earth. As you can see, there is a wide array of organisms, including plants and fungi that aren't on this picture, and millions more that are not on that picture. And millions of species that live on Earth today are related by descent by common ancestor. Another important factor is that natural selection and reproductive isolation leads to speciation in new environments. So let's look at an example of this. This is a drawing of a real experiment that was done with Drosophila or fruit flies. As we can see, we started out with our original population, and they were red-eyed flies. And then they put half the population in a chamber with maltose, which is a type of sugar, and then they put the other half in a chamber with starch as their food. And then they let a lot of time go by, and they noticed that the flies physically changed. There were lighter colored flies in the maltose food, and there were orange colored flies or darker colored flies in the starch food. And then, after many generations of fruit flies, they brought them back together, and they realized that the maltose light colored fruit flies would mate with each other, and the starch dark colored fruit flies would mate with each other. So enough time had passed that these had been reproductively isolated, where they couldn't interbreed, they couldn't mate with each other, and it was a new environment, and so that they wouldn't mate with each other. And if more time had even passed, then it would be so many differences that these wouldn't mate at all, and there would be new species. You would have your maltose fruit flies and your starch fruit flies, and then after a while they couldn't interbreed and they would be new species. That would be a speciation event had occurred. That would mean evolution had occurred. So natural selection and reproductive isolation leads to speciation in new environments. And the opposite, where there is extinction. Extinction occurs when the environment changes. Less diverse populations are at a greater risk of extinction. Let's look at an example of this. Let's talk about extinction. So here are some pictures of some fossils of organisms that have gone extinct. And we think of extinction as the loss of a species of animal and plants, and sometimes that species is the last of a major group. For example, the extinction of the last species of trilobite at the end of the Permian period was the last in that group, and it had existed for 250 million years. For some context, we know that humans, modern humans, have been around for 40,000 to about 200,000 years. And then these had been around for 250 million years when they went extinct. And then the Tuatara is the last species in its group of reptiles, the sphenodontids. And so it's endangered. If that species goes extinct, it will be the last of its group that have been around for the last 200 million years. So trilobites had become rare by the Permian period and were down to only a handful of species. And the jawed fishes that appeared during the Silurian and Devonian periods were like to munch on them. And the trilobites, again, the last species went extinct during the Permian extinction, which was about 250 million years ago. So extinction happens if an environment change occurs faster than animals and plants can adapt to it. This change could be the physical environment, like climate warming or cooling, or the biological environment, like a new predator enters the habitat. If the change happens quickly enough on a global scale, the result will be a mass extinction. So let's look at the difference between background extinction and mass extinction. Extinction occurs constantly. At any point in time, animals and plant species have become extinct, and it's roughly balanced out by the evolution of new species. This low level of everyday extinction is called background extinction, and it happens steadily. However, when the environment changes worldwide, we get extinction on a much larger scale. These are mass extinction events that may eliminate half or more of the species on Earth, usually over hundreds of thousands of years. These events occur rarely and are separated by tens of millions of years. There is concern among many biologists and paleontologists that we may now be on the edge of a mass extinction produced by human activities. What increases an extinction risk? So a small population size increases the risk that the species will become extinct, and a narrow geographic range. If the species has few individuals that are concentrated in a small area, any local change, like a severe drought or a failure of the food supply, could push that species over the edge to extinction. And species with big populations spread out over a large area are more likely to survive. So large land animals that have relatively small population sizes and that breed slowly are often the victims of extinction events. In the past, we can think of woolly mammoths and mastodons became extinct. They were definitely large species that bred slowly. And we also know that there are some large animals that are endangered right now, like elephants. So what are the implications for current climate change? Well, we know that when we burn carbon dioxide, it gets in the atmosphere, and then the carbon dioxide acts as a warming gas, and it makes overall the climate warmer, and that it changes climatic patterns so that there are more floods, but also more droughts, and it messes up with food supply. So it makes it hard for plants and animals to adapt to that. So we know that the rate at which things are happening is important. So let's go back to a previous extinction event. So we know that there have been mass extinctions in the past. So during the Permian extinction, about 95% of animals went extinct. So the world has seen this before. I just don't want to be around at that point in time when 95% of things are going extinct. Also, we need to take into consideration the pace at which things are happening. So the Permian extinction geologically happened like that, but it didn't really. It happened over about 30 to 100,000 years. The current climate change we're looking at happening over the last 150 years. So the pace at which things are happening right now on Earth are really different than what we've seen before. So if that sounds depressing, always know that there's things that you can do. You can always do something to conserve energy, like turning off the lights when you don't need it and not driving when you don't need to drive. Another important part is the fossil evidence, not only for physical evolution, but behavioral changes. So let's check out a quick video.
Involves change over time. And I have here 5 skulls of 5 different fossil individuals out of about 6,000 fossil individuals that are known that help document the course of human evolution. Well, you can see from just these 5 representing about 2.5 million years ago to about 1 million years ago to near the present, that there were changes in the size of the brain case and also in the size and shape of the face. And you can see that the brain got larger over time and that the face generally got smaller over time until you get to our species, where we have the largest brain and the smallest face that's tucked in underneath the brain case. So that's very different from what we have 2.5 million years ago with a small brain case and a large sloping face. So what we see then is change over time in the physical form, in this case brain size and the size of the face. But human evolution involved not only change in the physical form of early humans up to ourselves, but also change in behavior. And so I have some of the stone tools that help show us some of the changes that occurred in the behavior seen in the archaeological remains. And so we have the earliest stone technologies known back to a little bit more than 2.5 million years ago. The earliest technologies consisted of basically a rock, like a cobblestone like this, which was battered, and you also have the core, and the hammerstone was brought back down on this cobble, and flake scars were made, and what flew off from the cobble itself were the sharp stone flakes, which were really useful for cutting meat off of animal bones, and also maybe whittling a stick, and that stick could be used to dig in the ground for roots and tubers, or maybe even deeper into the ground for water during times when things were dry. About 1.5 million years ago, we see that the early humans were able to make really large flakes and to take those flakes and to strike them all the way around, creating a sharp edge all the way around. And this is a really handy tool to carry around with you for a lot of different purposes. This is the oldest known hand axe, and hand axes were around for yet another million years. Things changed pretty slowly. Well, what we see then, beginning about 500,000 years ago, is that the stone hand axes became smaller and they became more and more refined to the point where they became almost really pieces of art, really beautiful craftsmanship. And then technology kept getting smaller as you see these fine blades, and then even the innovation of arrowheads. And arrowheads were great, of course, for killing fast and dangerous prey. And so the history of technology has been pretty much the same ever since, going from big and clunky to really small and refined. We then see over the next 100,000 years up to the present, innovation really picks up, and we have the origin of, say, bone harpoons, which were used for fishing, and also objects where we see symbolic markings for the first time on the bones, on antlers, on many different kinds of objects, indicating that early humans were beginning to live in a symbolic world where they used language to communicate with one another. We even have artifacts like this. This is one of the oldest known artist's palettes. Humans of our species put pigment over this flat surface, and they use that pigment and sometimes put it in their mouth to make paint or mixed it with water, and they put art onto cave walls, these fantastic painted caves that we know from Europe, from Africa, from Asia and Australia, and eventually all around the world. And that represents the origin of art. And so what we have then here is not only change in physical form, brain size, and the size of the face, but also change in behavior, and that's evolution.
That video was put on by the Smithsonian Natural Museum, National Museum of Natural History. It's a website, and if you are interested in human evolution, I can send you the link because it is a very interesting website. To finish off our notes, our evolution unit notes are done. Good job, everybody. You get a star. I will see you later. Bye.